In 1920, County Cork found itself at the epicentre in Ireland's struggle for independence. On January 30th, 1920, Tomás McCurtain from Ballyknockan in North Cork was elected mayor. Within months of his appointment, he was shot in his home to the great shock of the nation. We now meet Tomás's granddaughter, Fionnuala McCurtain, at his home place in Ballyknockan. So I'm joined by Fionnuala McCurtain, who is Tomás McCurtain's granddaughter. Fionnuala, thanks very much for joining us. And
no trouble at all.
You might tell us where we are today.
Where we are now is out at the original homestead of the Curtains that were then, that was later obviously Tomás McCurtain, and this is where he was born and grew up. He moved into Cork City when he was 13, but until then he went to the local school, which is a mile across the fields here. You can actually see it from where we're standing, but this was his original home, and it's on the side of the old Cork to Limerick Road. And at 13 he left here and went into Blackpool to be educated in the North Mon and to live with his sister Mary, because it was just too far to commute, but he was in the national school here.
Very good. And you might tell us a little bit about Tomás's upbringing and life here in his early years.
Life here was the typical country home, really. He went to school, he came home, he helped up around the farm. They were a large family and he was the youngest. His parents were, when I say strange people, they were very well educated. They spoke fluent Irish and they brought him up with great family values.
I'm joined by John F. O'Sullivan, who's the chairman of the Mourneabbey Heritage Association. John, you might tell us a little bit more about Tomás's upbringing here.
Tomás, of course, as you know, was born here in the house in 1884 on the 20th of March, and he died on the 20th of March in 1920. That's maybe significant. And of course, as Fionnuala said, he was the youngest of a large family and doted upon by everybody. He was spoiled in one way, and he was enrolled in Burnfort's National School, which is across the field, just over there, about a mile and a half, in 1891 when he was 7 years of age. Now, still at home, it was a highly supportive of the Irish language at home. He would have learned a lot of Irish sayings and proverbs and words from all the people around, and would have he grew up with a pure love of Irish. Now, he also would have known the absolute whole of the story of Ballyknockan Barracks, RIC Barracks, which is only a couple of 100 metres down the road from here, and that was captured and burnt in 1867, and that would have influenced him very, very much in his view of Irish freedom.
We might talk a little bit about the events in 1920 and what led to Tomás's murder.
Yeah. He was in the Volunteers, he was head of the Volunteers, he was elected by Sinn Féin. He knew that he was at risk by going forward as Lord Mayor, and then it actually became more obvious because he was getting death threats. It was a very volatile situation in Cork, and of course then, you know, he went ahead to recognise Dáil Éireann, and in his own way, a lot of that was nearly sealing his death. He was a marked man, he was in hiding. He had spent a lot of time in prison from 1916 onwards because they broke their word of what would happen in Cork after 1916. And so then he had spent many years in exile. So he'd gone through an awful lot of turbulence by the time he actually became Lord Mayor, which you'd think was nearly a settled post, do you know what I mean? But actually it was more volatile for him.
And on the night of his birthday, you might talk us through those tragic events.
Yes, very strange. My grandmother was at home cooking the birthday cake, as families do. The kids had the presents wrapped, the scene set for the following day because he was going to be in late. He came home late and was going to bed, and my grandmother slept on the side of the bed that was by the door. Now in barracks, what they didn't know, that up in the barracks in McCurtain Street they were getting ready to come down. They had dimmed all the lights around the city streets that led to Blackpool. They had isolated the house, and then the men came down with blackened faces and banging the door. This was about 1 o'clock in the morning. So my grandmother, who felt that she'd only just actually closed her eyes, opened them up again, said she'd go down, and Tomás said, no, I'll go. But she was, as I said, on the bedside, so she got out in her nightdress and came down, and she came down the stairs, and as she came down, the glass of the front door shattered in on top of her, and as she opened the door, actually the door was being broken in on top of her as well. And they bundled her to the side and said, "Where's McCurtain?" and pulled her out by the street. And she went, "He's upstairs," like she was in total shock. And they went upstairs shouting McCurtain, and my grandfather came out. At this stage he was on the landing facing down the stairs, and they shot him twice. So the first shot woke the kids. My father saw the shooting from his bedroom and came out, and he held him for an hour and a half as he died. And they spoke to each other, and the last words from my grandmother were, "Remember, it's for Ireland." And he said, "Into thy hands, O Lord, I commend my spirit." But you know, that was an indelible imprint on my father's memory forever. You know, like, how would you get over that as a child?
2 days after his death, thousands of Cork citizens lined the streets of the city to pay respect to their fallen Lord Mayor.
Such a tragic year.
It was, and you know, you do wonder, had he lived a little bit longer, what he would have grown to be, because 36 is still a very young person. I mean, he raised the tricolour and gave allegiance to Dáil Éireann. He was the first Republican Lord Mayor. He had a great military mind as well. And you just wonder, I mean, I never knew my grandfather. I never had the opportunity, and yet I'm so proud of what I know he has achieved. But you know, you wonder if he'd lived a full life, what he would have been like.
After McCurtain's death, his dear friend Terence McSwiney was elected mayor. He was a TD for the first Dáil, representing mid-County Cork. We hear from Cathal Brua, Terence's grandson, about his life as mayor.
Terence McSwiney was a poet, author, dramatist, a philosopher and a lecturer. He and his wife Muriel had one daughter, Morrogue, my mother. She was only 2 years old when he died in Brixton Prison in London after 74 days refusing food, as the only way he could confront the British Empire and oppose England's authority to rule in Ireland. On his appointment as Lord Mayor, he said, "This contest of ours is not on our side a rivalry of vengeance, but one of endurance. It is not they who can inflict the most, but they who can suffer the most will conquer."
Kilmurry has a strong association with McSwiney and his legacy. At the Independence Museum Kilmurry, we'll meet with Deirdre Burke, and she will show us their collection.
Deirdre, thanks for welcoming us here to the Independence Museum in Kilmurry. Really looking forward to seeing your Terence McSwiney exhibition.
Well, I'll bring you down, and we'll be delighted to welcome you, and I'm delighted to show you our key exhibits.
Brilliant, thank you.
Terence McSwiney is a sort of an important son of the area. He himself was born in Cork, but his family came from Kilmurry. His father was born here, and his grandparents are buried in the old graveyard here in Kilmurry. But Terence himself was very well known in the area because he both learnt Irish out in Ballingarry, so he used to cycle out this way, and he himself and Tomás McCurtain learnt Irish together, and he met his wife Muriel Murphy learning Irish in Ballingarry. But he also set up the local volunteers, and he used to cycle out to drill the men, and he set up 5 or 6 different companies of volunteers locally. His most well-known work is probably Principles of Freedom, which was collected together as a book after his death, but is cited by such revolutionaries as Gandhi, Nehru, Ho Chi Minh, Nelson Mandela as one of the most important influential works on the struggle for independence, particularly, of course, against the British Empire.
In his book Principles of Freedom he wrote, "It is love of country that inspires us, not hate of the enemy." In a physical contest on the field of battle, it is allowable to use tactics and strategy, to retreat as well as advance, to have recourse to a ruse as well as open attack. But in matters of principle there can be no tactics. There's one straightforward course to follow, and that course must be found and followed without swerving to the end.
McSwiney was arrested on August 12th in City Hall, and he joined a hunger strike in solidarity with Republican prisoners while he was in Brixton Prison.
So can you tell us about Terence McSwiney's death?
McSwiney died after 74 days on hunger strike. The body was placed in Southwark Cathedral, and 30,000 people in London filed past the body there. The plan was a funeral in Dublin, followed by burial in Glasnevin Cemetery in the Republican plot. That didn't suit the British. They thought that would be far too high profile, so they kidnapped the body in the port and shipped it over to Cork. The family were on the ferry going to Dublin, so when the body arrived in Cork, there was nobody to take receipt of the body. The family came down the following day, took receipt of the body, and there was a massive funeral in Cork. All of this with the full glare of the press. And we have here in the museum a wheel from the hearse that carried the coffin at the funeral in Cork.
On the same day of McSwiney's death, Joe Murphy also died on hunger strike, and he was an employee of Cork County Council for a time. And 1 week prior, Michael Fitzgerald from Fermoy died in hunger strike. McSwiney left a global impact with his plight for freedom. The news of his tragic death spread far and wide and left a legacy still felt today. Tomás McCurtain and Terence McSwiney were both laid to rest in the Republican plot at St Finbarr Cemetery in Cork City. 1920 was a truly traumatic year for Cork. Losing 2 mayors in succession left the city and county of Cork with deep wounds and a sense of resilience and struggle. It is important we remember the 2 mayors, those who died in hunger strike, and all men and women who sacrificed everything for the Ireland we have today.